Since it first started tumbling into Ireland through the old pirate coves of West Cork and in the stomachs of drug mules coming from Miami, cocaine has become the drug of our nation. It has swept in like a blizzard, dusting every corner of every small town, and so swift and total has its spread been that the Irish are now some of the biggest users in the world. But to unravel how a small island like ours on the edge of Europe ended up such a big player in the major cocaine leagues, we must follow the white supply lines back to the beginning. We must follow the routes it has taken as it travels across the globe. And most importantly, we need to follow the cowboys who put us on the map. So join me, Nicola Talent, for my new live show, Cocaine Cowboys, the story of Ireland's love affair with Colombia's biggest export. Limited tickets now available for February 10th at the Lime Tree Theatre in Limerick, February 15th in Cork's Everyman, and at Dublin's 3 Olympia on Sunday, February 18th. Tickets available at venues or on mcd.ie. Eamon, so did Gary Davis, do you think, apply for a job online? I'll pull my mic in a bit. Did he apply for a job in the Silk Road, do you think? Because they had essentially got a photograph of his passport somewhere. So it looked like maybe he saw a job online or something and went for it.
I suppose the Silk Road was seen as a community. And so people who were involved, who became trusted. And it wasn't just about selling drugs. There was a lot of, I suppose, libertarian kind of viewpoints and about the freedom of the internet. And this is a bold new kind of frontier for mankind. And they were going to, have a kind of a stateless place where people could exist and be treated.
Sounds so like Cyberbunker.
Well, look, I mean, but they genuinely believed it. I mean, and Gary Davis, this very young man from Wicklow, was, used this as part of his defense when he was trying to avoid being extradited back to the States. But I mean,
it's difficult for people to get their head around this. So we'll just explain in the beginning what Silk Road was. It was basically a marketplace for everything you wanted to buy, wasn't it? But it was on the Darknet. So it's not just, you couldn't just pick up your laptop and go in on the ordinary internet that most of us use.
It's called it's called the Darknet. So I mean, like, you have the so-called ClearNet, which is, sundayworld.com and all your Google pages and things like that. And you can search whatever you want for on google.com or whatever search engine. If you're from the 1990s like me, you still might use Yahoo or something.
Yeah.
And then the deep net is all the stuff in the background, like, if we're using Teams through the internet to have a news conference, that is deep net.
Right.
And then you have the so-called dark net, which is, stuff that cannot be accessed by Google. Well, stuff on the deep net wouldn't be accessed by Google either, wouldn't come up in Google searches. But it uses technology then, Tor, which was developed by the US Navy. And basically, when you send a request through Google, its little data packages go to one place, and that's all traceable. So what Tor does is it splits it up and it sends all the little bits of packages to various different servers, and they all go to the destination you want it to go, or to the website. So it
sort of scrambles it so nobody can identify where you are.
So you're not lighting yourself up. Like your internet. Your IP address isn't going to be, it's not going to be found. And similarly, then the people who are running the sites, their location can't be found either. So you have to use Tor. So you have to download Tor. It's like a browser. And if you use it correctly, it's very effective at being.
You download Tor then on your normal.
Yeah.
If I Googled Tor and I went into it, I could download it.
And then you'd need your connections. You'd need the URLs to find whatever onion site that you're looking for. Which again, they're not Googleable. And there's loads of marketplaces out there still, since the Silk Road, was busted and gone.
I said to you about Cyberbunker because, of course, that was the German server underground, sort of similar to Silk Road. There was a lot of things for sale on it. Of course, George the Penguin Mitchell was involved, which is the only reason I know anything about it at all. And there's a documentary on Netflix about it at the moment. But that was that same kind of thing when Cyberbunker set up. First of all, in the Netherlands, there was this group of people who believed they were creating a kind of a new world
Yeah,
order,
yeah.
and that they were king and queen, and
You're gonna usurp the existing kind of national nation states that are there. You're gonna have a parallel banking system, a parallel ecosystem, or whatever.
yeah.
And
So you're going to have new laws and new.
Well, not even new laws, but that I mean, in fairness to the Silk Road, like despite the idea of the dark net where anything is available, and you have terrible stories of people involved in selling child pornography or child abuse images, and you've people selling weapons and all sorts of stuff like that. The Silk Road was from a very libertarian point of view. They didn't actually do any of that stuff. There wasn't any stolen credit cards. There wasn't any pornographic material. There was none of that. It was just about drugs, and it was about using Bitcoin,
right?
To kind of to push all that, to allow anonymity, like in these transactions.
So were they small drug transactions, like were people going on and buying a bit of cocaine that was going to be delivered to their house?
That's how it started,
right?
In 2011, and it was. It was well. When you say small, it was a couple of $100,000 worth, of drugs transactions.
Not small.
And then, but then Gawker.com did an article around that time, and it just exploded. And unlike other darknet sites that that look like somebody just wrote on the back of a cigarette package. The Silk Road, compared to what else was on the darknet, was really professional looking. It looked like an Amazon type website. It looked, and it had forum administrators that were there to sort out if there was a shipping issue with your heroin or your MMDA or whatever it was. They'd get onto the buyer, and there was reviews. So if you sold bad quality cocaine, you'd get a 1-star rating, for not selling the good stuff. And it was cheaper, and it was about good quality, and it was about making sure. I sound like I'm advocating drug use.
I'm going to go in the sense amazing.
No, but this is where they were coming from, and it was about it's up to people's personal choice if they want to inject substances into their bodies, or they want to take tablets or whatever. It's up to them.
Yeah.
But here's a safe place where you can do it and exercise your own choice. You don't have to go down a dark alley.
Right.
You don't have to go meet someone dodgy.
But the Silk Road itself was sort of like it was like the Amazon, so it was connecting the customer to the seller essentially, and in the middle, it presumably was checking out the sellers that they were okay, that they were actually going to ship the stuff, and it was somehow involved in. It was obviously getting a cut, the Silk Road, of every transaction that happened.
Yeah, I think it was something like 10% he was getting, which, if you consider it was Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, was just going through the roof. So I think it was a colossal amount of money, partly because it was Bitcoin. But I mean, look, I think if you went on as a seller and then you proved to be a fraudster, you didn't get back on again.
Right.
And they ran it well, and it became trusted. And there were trusted users, like in terms of people who were buyers and people who were sellers. And then there was trusted forum administrators and, people who were looking after, I suppose, the back end of the customer service, which is where Gary Davis came in.
Yeah.
So sorry, I actually can't remember how he originally got involved, but he ended up being...
So Gary Davis from Kilpedder in County Wicklow, if you don't mind, and he was one of these administrators on it. Yeah,
and there wasn't that many. And he was getting, I think, $1,500 worth of Bitcoin a week to do this, which was, considerable amount for a 24, 23-year-old.
Was he sitting at home in Kilpedder and Wicklow and doing it?
Pretty much, yeah, using his parents' house, which we called out to, and there was a lovely little bungalow and nice leyland hedge around it, nice middle-class, well-to-do family. He wasn't from a poor background. Now, he
what is his background? Is he sort of computer geeky, or?
Well, if you read it's on the internet for anyone to find. But there was a sentence hearing statement by his lawyers in the States. This is after he was extradited from Ireland. He was arrested here, I think, in 2013 or 2014. So he was extradited in 2018 and sentenced in 2019. And if you go through that, he was, he had they're kind of more or less saying he had an obsessive personality issues, and he had a diagnosis of, a form of Asperger's, and that he'd sit so long at the computer, he'd soil himself, and, and he had great difficulties with personal relationships, but also in the same in the same witness, or in the same sentencing statement. Then there's also a letter from a girlfriend and an ex-girlfriend saying how great he is and he's wonderful and he's helped so many people. And he's such a lovely guy and great with his family and all the rest. So you're kind of getting a mixed kind of image that's just from his own lawyers
and for somebody so incapable of removing themselves from the computer, he still fed into this community that was the Silk Road.
Yeah, and he said it came out of his obsession with Bitcoin and that he was interested in kind of the whole, I suppose. It was like it is an ideological movement, that's going to, change the economics of the internet and the economics of the world eventually. So they think, still hasn't happened, and he was saying that's where his involvement came in. It was nothing to do with facilitating drug dealers and all the rest. But of course, that's what he was charged with in the state was conspiracy to traffic narcotics. So.
And to go back to that, so Silk Road was this hugely successful, the most successful sort of underground darknet marketplace. With a moral code, or so they believed they had a moral code, and trade was in Bitcoin. So Gary Davis from Kilpedder and Wicklow is working as one of the administrators on this site. What happens? Because, it's operating and presumably the FBI become interested in it at some stage and for some reason, and how do they infiltrate it and find out who's in there?
Oh, that's such a hard question, Nicola. I'll try and run through it. It's not that it's complicated. It's just my memory's not as what it used to be. I know he was. I suppose Gary Davis was a bit player, and the main person or driver behind it was a character that was only known as Dread Pirate Roberts, which is a character or a name that comes out of the book from The Princess Bride, which is also a movie. But the key point about that is Dread Pirates Robert is. Yeah, he's a fictional character, but the other fictional characters in the book use his reputation to terrify other pirates or other people. And once they've made their money, they disappear into the distance and someone else becomes the Dread Pirate Roberts. So there's always this theory that Ross Ulbricht was only just one of a number of Dread Pirates Roberts, even though he's the guy now serving a life sentence. But I think the Gawker article in 2011 kind of put the spotlight on it and it exploded and it became, a much bigger marketplace than it had been before. And then a Dread Pirates Roberts, whether it was Ross Ulbricht or not, gave an interview to Forbes magazine and more or less said, you're going to be putting me on that list of yours very soon, or comments to that, to that effect. And so that got, I suppose, the politicians didn't like that. Law enforcement, I guess, didn't like it. And suddenly there was political will to do something about it. And then, which we get back then to the whole ability to, of people to stay anonymous on the internet. And despite all this, brilliant engineering and work, they were infiltrated. And basically, I mean, the FBI did some pretty basic stuff. They started building up trust on the site as both a user, as both buyers and sellers. They waited until they got a chance. Then I think somebody in Australia was trying to. Was good at doing larger international shipments. And at this stage, one of the FBI, plants on the website was saying, look, can you help me out here? And of course, he gave me his actual address to send him his heroin to. So he was basically turned. So they had him. So they were able to kind of see it from his point of view. So they now had a very senior, more trusted user on the site. And then, mysteriously enough, the FBI got all the information then from a server which was based in Iceland. And they claim they got it through this particular trick. You know those captchas when you get that to prove you're not a robot, like
yes.
click on all the
captcha.
Click on all the pictures that have a ladder in it or whatever, or shoes or boots or whatever. And they figured out then this guy called Frosty had rented this and it was anonymous, so they still weren't sure what to do. They were slowly making progress. But so while you had kind of at one end this higher tech thing going on, you had another kind of lonely guy. I think he was I'm not sure if he was DEA, but another guy just started Googling stuff about the Silk Road. But he did it before it became famous in the Gawker article. So he started looking for anybody who had ever said anything about it, and he found a person who did a lot of talking on different forums about the Silk Road this and the Silk Road that. So his name was Algergon or something. I can't remember the name, but he had some username anyway. And so he realized then that he went he found a previous one, and he found then that this guy said, look, if anyone wants to work on the Silk Road, let me know. And he gave his own Gmail address, which surprisingly enough was ross.ulbricht@gmail.com.
Right.
So for all, trying to keep things secret, he actually used his own name on an email connected to somebody.
Not total rocket science.
Well, this is
investigated, but essentially there was no office. So these people, these administrators were all over the world in various places, like our boy in Kilpedder and County Wicklow. You had Ross Ulbricht, who set it up and obviously was the guy who was making most of the money out of it. Was he based in the States?
Yeah, so, they didn't know where he was at that stage. And when they got this researcher who'd basically Googled his way to the name of the person who was running it now, but I still couldn't be sure. There was no necessarily any evidence, but here was somebody that was involved. And he couldn't get anyone to listen higher up. And then eventually he was on a conference call, and and he had no idea of that servers in Iceland had been breached at this stage, and that the FBI were actually watching everything. They could see all the transactions going on, and they didn't shut it down. So because they were trying to catch the people involved, so they allowed a lot of, drug transactions to go on, which they've been criticized for since. But and then this investigator, I think towards the end, he said, "Oh yeah," and I think he might have used another name one time, Frosty. At which point, that was it. They got, okay, it looks like it's the same guy, but they had to catch him in the act. Mm-hmm. So they realized then that he was using public libraries to access the website. So they lured him out I think it was in San Francisco, and they had one of the FBI plants on the website saying, "Oh, there's a problem with such and such a shipment. Can you help me out?" And they waited till he came into the library, and two agents started a mock fight or a row behind him. When he turned around, another agent grabbed the laptop, and they had it on. They could see that, Dread Pirate Roberts was active on the site. So they had him. And that's where they found all of, the incriminating information. And it's where they found a copy of Gary Davis's passport.
It's extraordinary, that you can run a business like that, by going in and out of a library.
Well, you can do so much off your laptop. I mean, how often are we now? Working well out of the office. But then again, I suppose that,
it must have taken him a while to set this up, or had he, 2011 to 2013, the Silk Road was in operation. But to set it up, everything has to start small.
Yeah.
So he must have reached out to a few sort of sellers as such.
Well, I suppose it's if you build it, they'll come, from that baseball movie. But Ulbricht had at one stage kind of a version of Amazon, a legal version after he left college, and it was kind of secondhand books. It was a national in the US, and there was, for every transaction, there'd be a certain donation to charity. So unlike Jeff Bezos, he went bust, and it didn't succeed. So he was then involved in. He became involved in the Silk Road. Now, he claimed he didn't set it up, that he took it over. And there was this whole idea that there's different Dread Pirates Roberts. And there was one of them, there was a Dread Pirates Roberts that was trying to order a hit on a person that they felt could compromise the site early on. And he always denied, look, this wasn't me. And he was never actually charged with, conspiracy to murder. And so there is some kind of, there is some, I suppose, circumstantial evidence that he wasn't the original Dread Pirate Roberts, and that there may have been others, or there could have been different people acting as Dread Pirate Roberts at any stage. But he was the one who got caught live.
He was the main guy, and he was charged with engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, narcotics conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking in February of 2014. And months later, there was other charges added. 2015, the trial took place, and he was sentenced to double life imprisonment plus 40 years without any possibility of parole. That's a really heavy sentence.
Yeah.
I know this is the US, where nobody seems to ever come out of prison. So in actual fact, Davis is quite lucky to be making his way out now. But I mean, that sentence was based on the fact that, he was seen as having made hundreds of millions out of this and facilitating so many crimes, the levels of which were unprecedented, never seen before. But he has supporters who are actively hoping that be overturned.
Yeah, and that's coming, I guess, from the ideological thing, and it's even the whole libertarian view, of life, which a lot of the Americans are quite in favor of, smoke your weed, carry your gun, do what you want, once you don't hurt anyone else, and you don't, break the 10 commandments, you can pretty much do what you want, and that's that viewpoint. I mean, I think they petitioned Donald Trump when he was in office to pardon him, and Donald Trump publicly said that he was considering it. Now, he didn't. He's still in Terre Haute, which is a federal penitentiary. And there is no, I discovered recently, there's no parole in the federal system, unlike in state systems in the US. So once you get an X amount of a sentence, that's it. They can't parole you. Like, unless you get a pardon or, you go back to court and get a new sentence. So yeah, he's in for
And he's
a long
only
time.
just 39. He's about to turn 40. He's born 1984. Gary Davis then. So the US identified him as being one of these administrators. And as you said, there weren't that many of them. They came for him.
Yeah, well, obviously it came from the passport on Ulbricht's laptop. And he was identified then as the person who was using the name Libertas. So, and he was seen as quite a serious enough administrator. And what didn't really help his case was that after the original Silk Road was shut down, there was an attempt to set up a second Silk Road too, which wasn't doing very well until Libertas appeared on it and telling people, don't worry guys, this is the real deal. And so that kind of, it kind of sealed his fate, I think, from the Americans' point of view. They were determined to go after him. They probably would have come after him anyway, but it was definitely, as far as they were concerned, it was another, I suppose, pointer of his guilt that he wasn't an innocent dupe or whatever. And he would have written, like, there was stuff about him, also writing these political tracts explaining his kind of libertarian point of view, and that he very much shared the same views as the Dread Pirate Roberts, and that kind of whole thing about the internet being the Wild West again.
Would he be seen as was he a kind of a number two or a kind of an underling of?
It's hard to know, to be honest. Like, like from reading through all the stuff, like he was an important cog in the machine, and was dealing with lots of different people on both sides. He was dealing with sellers and buyers, so he was known to the people who were buying the drugs and selling the drugs. So, like, it was an important role. But, like, I mean, there was no great wealth uncovered. Like, he did have, I think there was something like there's an element of Bitcoin, which I think eventually, when he was sent back to the States, was worth 180,000 euro. It'd been a lot less when he was given it, when he was getting 1,500 a week to act as a role. And he started off as a slightly more junior version, and then was promoted up as he kind of, I suppose, as he earned his bones on the site with Dread Pirate Roberts and kind of moved up in the game, and all from this little house this middle class bungalow in Kilpedder house in Kilpedder village in just outside of Greystones.
He was extradited in 2018 from Ireland after a long legal battle, but he admitted his role in a plea deal in October of that year, which meant that he got the 6.5-year sentence as opposed to the rest of his life with no chance of parole.
And Ulbricht had a chance to do a plea deal.
Right.
And his lawyers are so confident that he was going to beat it because they want to be able to prove that the FBI got all the information from Iceland illegally. They did it through the National Surveillance Agency or whatever they're called. And the judge says, no, you can't do that, and threw it out. And there was the other evidence that there was more than one Dread Pirate Roberts. They weren't allowed to present that. So all the kind of the main defense arguments were thrown out. So Davis is about to be released. And where has he been in the prison system in the US? Yeah, well, this is why it came up, I guess, this week, that he's out on Saturday on the 13th of January. So, and he's been in a place which rang a bell as soon as I read it, was a Federal Correction Institute, Hazelton, because that's where Whitey Bulger was killed after his transfer from Florida and was put into this area. He was in a wheelchair, and an Italian mobster, a hitman who's serving a long sentence, I think, in the US, basically is accused now of organising his killing, and they try to cut out his tongue and they gouged his eyes out. And
he was well in his 80s and incapacitated, as you say, and wheelchair bound at that stage. Bulger, of course, had evaded authorities for decades, but was kind of outed really as a tout, as a rat, which was why that unforgivable sin of the underworld followed him.
Yeah, that trial is going ahead in December this year. So
right.
Might keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Worth doing.
That was a kind of a hitman style, suspected hitman or something that was behind bars and was...
Yeah. And it's a real, an Italian, New York Italian mafia man who's serving time for for that kind of activity, like, pretty serious stuff. And there was two others that he dragged into it, one of whom who said I think he was kind of an ordinary kind of prisoner who was sharing a cell. And I just remember reading a quote. He says, when people like him ask, you don't say no. And he had no real choice except to act as lookout, or he was next.
How does a guy like Davis settle into a prison like that and cope in a prison like that? Of course, it'd be great if he would tell us that himself. But
well, he did.
Yeah.
At the sentence hearing, he was held in the what's it called, the place in Manhattan. It's the Federal Correctional Center in Manhattan, Brooklyn, which is known as Little Guantanamo Bay because of the conditions are so poor. Like it's infested with cockroaches. I think it's not properly ventilated, so you have vapor or whatever condensing on the ceiling and dripping down on.
This is where Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were kept, and she was complaining bitterly about the conditions.
Exactly, yeah. And Gary Davis's legal team, would have put forward the argument that one of the reasons he couldn't be extradited was because he would be subject to cruel and inhuman treatment, because this is where he'd be going. And it's a fair argument, I guess, in some senses, but he didn't. It didn't wash with the judges. So he did go back, and then we found out more about his life in the Metropolitan Centre when he was again in the sentence hearing, where it was mentioned that he spent 9 months there, and he'd done 35 classes. He was involved in tutoring other students. He was very agreeable, lovely man. He suffered terribly in there as well. He got skin rashes from the drips coming off the ceiling. There was very little privacy.
What's in the drips?
I don't know, whatever steams off people in there.
That is disgusting.
Don't get fixated now. And there's other stuff we can worry about. But there's 26 people into a dormitory in the place, and you're mixing with everybody. So you could have your, everything from your Sinaloa kind of hitmen to, people who are involved in stamp frauds or something like, and then Gary Davis, who's this, at the time, I guess, what was he, 26-year-old from Wicklow with some
with no experience of
autism being dropped into this situation. But according to his lawyers anyway, he made the best of it, and he didn't get in trouble, and he helped other prisoners, and basically made it a very positive experience, and had changed his views on his libertarianism as well. Had gone through counselling and all that. So
is he headed for home?
He will be, but I imagine he'll be doing it courtesy of the US Customs and Enforcement, whatever they call the ICE crowd.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I presume they'll just come and pick him up from Hazelton on Saturday or whatever day he gets going. And if it is the federal system, he won't get out until the 13th. So presumably he'll be in custody, and then it's a matter of time whenever they get around to doing it, they'll send him back. So it could be anything from the next day to 6 weeks later. They pretty much have the power to do what they like, ICE, as we know. That there has been a few guys we know from Ireland in the last couple of years who've been sent back, different people.
I'm sure, whatever else, he appreciates that he's getting out of there a young man still. Things could have gone very different for him.
Yeah, and do you know what? He'll probably do okay, because, again, there was a letter sent into the court from a company called Bitcoin.com. And they said, while he was awaiting extradition, he was working for us, and he was just only brilliant, and we don't know how we're going to survive without him. And that when he gets out, there's always going to be a job for him. So he's able to do stuff, and behind the scenes on the internet. So
what happened to the Bitcoin he made? His $1,500 of it a week.
That was the US. What was it? There was I think it was.
It must have
been part of the. No, it was part of the plea deal, because it was sent back to the States. There was an attempt to look for them back here, and that didn't work, and they were forfeited to the US government. And I think that the US government now have something like, I'm just looking at it here, 69,370 Bitcoins that they've taken from Silk Road and other cryptocurrencies. And at the time, that was worth $1 billion, $1 billion, and now it's worth $3 billion. So
right.
Now they also think Dread Pirate Roberts, made something like $20 billion. Because he made whatever it was, $2 billion in Bitcoin at the time, and it's now worth 22 or 20.
Is it real money
billion.
Though? I still don't.
Well, if you can convert it, yes, it is.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, and there are exchanges, and there is one of the cryptocurrencies that has, I suppose, held its own. There's been others that are pretty dodgy, to say the least. They're nothing more than just Ponzi schemes. Really, the more people buy them, the more they go up. But we do know, like, I mean, the whole thing about anonymity, in one sense, it works and it doesn't work. That Bitcoin is actually entirely traceable because of the technology it uses. And the whole point of that is that it can't be duplicated. So I can't give you a Bitcoin and then keep it at the same time and send it to someone else. But it's sent then to your crypto wallet.
Yes.
And so while the transaction of the Bitcoin itself is tracked by the system, so we know this Bitcoin is a unique individual and it's never going to be, different. There's never going to be another one quite like it. And you have it in your crypto wallet. When you access that, how you do that can, blow your facade.
Your cover, of course, cover.
So that's where it kind of falls
down. Or if
down.
you lose the code to get into
who's that guy again? Yeah.
That was...
I nearly felt sorry for him.
Great story. Collins?
I can't remember it now.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not the only one.
He smoked too much cannabis, locked all his cryptocurrency in his crypto wallet and forgot the code. He didn't actually forget the code. He wrote it on a piece of paper, wrapped it up, put it in a fishing rod, and then he got caught with cannabis, sent to jail. And the farmer from the who owned the property he was in cleared it out, sent the fishing rod to the local dump, and it got sent to China for incineration. I mean, such a tragic tale. There was 100 and odd million euro worth of it, but of course the Criminal Assets Bureau are in possession of the crypto wallet. They just can't get into it.
They can't get into it, and they're hoping that someday, somehow, someone will figure out how to open these things, but unlikely.
It's kind of a certain type of character that washes around in this world of Darknet and, trading on the Darknet of criminal activities, but they are a certain character. They're tend to be, at least, a non-violent individual.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the FBI made this point about the Silk Road that 9 people had died as a result of drugs had been bought via the Silk Road, so it wasn't a victimless crime in that regard, and there was
from overdoses or something. You mean?
Presumably, yeah. So I mean, there is damage done to people, but I mean, I suppose that's what the libertarians are. I guess they're against that. They're saying, well, look, if people overdose, that's their lookout. They're silly, really, aren't they? And that's their viewpoint, that you should be free if you're a grown-up adult and you're getting what you're paying for. You're not getting adulterated drugs, or you're not getting bad quality, stuff. That you should be able to use it sensibly and get high or do whatever you want. And do it so it's safe from your point of view. It's still not safe to use drugs, but at least it's safer this way.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
fascinating story. So you'll be down knocking the door, I'm sure, in Kilpedder and County Wicklow to see if Mr. Davis would like to talk to us about his...
Well, he did say to me at the time that he couldn't talk until his extradition proceedings were over. So hopefully they're over now.
Because it'd be interesting to hear how he got on and what prison was like for him, and his thoughts now on the sort of the Darknet and all the rest of it. So we'll see. We'll certainly leave an open invitation for him.
No worries, Nicola.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eamon.
Cheers.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.